The shovel bit into frozen earth, with a sound that echoed through the pre-dawn silence of Oakwood Cemetery. Each strike sent vibrations up Maya Chen's arms, through her shoulders, into the hollow space where her heart used to be. 3 days. Her mother had been gone for 3 days, and Maya was here, in the oldest corner of Chicago's forgotten burial ground, digging a grave with her own hands. The cemetery director had been apologetic but firm. Without payment, we can't provide services. But Section D, the old paupers section, you can dig there yourself. It's allowed under the original charter from 1867. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. So here she was, 26 years old, her nursing scrubs still smelling faintly of the hospital disinfectant from her 12-hour shift that had ended at midnight. She'd driven it straight here, unable to face another morning in the apartment, where her mother's absence screamed from every corner. The physical exhaustion of digging felt better than the crushing weight of sitting still with her grief. Maya's hands were bleeding. She could feel the warm stickiness inside her work gloves, blisters that had formed and burst over the past 2 hours of relentless digging. The hole was maybe 3 feet deep now. She needed 6. 6 feet for the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 3 jobs to put her through nursing school, who'd died of a heart attack in their tiny kitchen while Maya was at work, saving other people's mothers. The injustice of it burned hotter than the pain in her hands. Her mother, Lin Chen, had cleaned houses during the day, worked as a seamstress at night, and on weekends, she'd sold homemade dumplings at the farmer's market. All so Maya could have a better life, and this was how it ended. In a forgotten corner of a cemetery, with a daughter too broke to afford even the most basic funeral services, digging in the dark like some kind of criminal. Maya drove the shovel in again, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the sweat despite the November cold. She'd sold everything she could in 3 days. Her laptop, her mother's sewing machine, even her own engagement ring from the relationship that had ended when her fiancé realized that marrying Maya meant taking on her mother's medical bills too. It still hadn't been enough. The funeral home wanted $4,000. The cemetery wanted $2,000 more. Maya had managed to scrape together $800 total. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered to the darkness. "You deserved so much better than this." The sky was beginning to lighten at the edges, that particular quality of pre-dawn illumination that made everything look both hopeful and desolate. Maya had maybe another hour before cemetery workers would arrive, before curious eyes would see her. Shame laid bare in this half-dug grave. She climbed into the hole, now deep enough that only her head and shoulders emerged above ground level, and continued digging from inside. It was easier this way, she discovered, though more claustrophobic. The walls of earth pressed in around her, dark and smelling of decay and old secrets. That's when she heard the car. Not just any car. The engine had that particular throaty purr of expensive machinery, completely out of place in this neglected section of the cemetery, where the headstones dated back over a century, and half of them had toppled into the weeds. Maya froze, her shovel suspended mid-strike. Through the growing dawnlight, she watched a black Mercedes SUV navigate the narrow, overgrown path. It stopped about 50 feet away, near a marble monument that stood taller than the others, clearly well-maintained despite the general decay surrounding it. The driver's door opened, but the man who emerged wasn't what Maya expected. He was young, maybe mid-30s, wearing an obviously expensive charcoal suit despite the early hour, but it was his face that struck her. Even from a distance, she could see the weight he carried, the same exhaustion that lived in her own bones. Grief, recognized grief, even across the space of an old cemetery. He moved with purpose toward the marble monument, carrying a single white lily. Maya watched, half hidden in her self-made grave, as the man knelt before the headstone with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his commanding presence. For several minutes, neither of them acknowledged the other. Maya stood perfectly still in her hole, afraid that any movement would draw attention to her humiliating situation. The man spoke softly to the grave, his words inaudible but his tone unmistakable. Love, loss, the particular poetry of grief that needed no translation. Then a gust of wind carried Maya's shovel, which she'd propped against the grave's edge, and it clattered down into the hole. With a metallic clang that shattered the cemetery's silence, the man's head snapped up, their eyes met across the 50 feet of overgrown grass and ancient graves. Maya saw his expression shift from surprise to confusion to something else. Recognition, maybe. Not of her specifically, but of what she was doing, of what it meant. He stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. A weapon, Maya realized with a spike of fear. This man carried a gun to visit a cemetery, but his hand stopped before completing the motion, and instead, he began walking toward her. Maya's heart hammered. She was trapped, literally, in a hole of her own making, with a strange man approaching and dawn still not quite breaking. Every true crime podcast she'd ever listened to flashed through her mind. But when he reached the edge of her grave and looked down at her, his expression wasn't threatening. It was something far more complicated. Understanding mixed with disbelief, and underneath it all, that bone-deep sadness that mirrored her own. "You're digging this yourself," he said. Not a question, a statement of impossible fact. Maya lifted her chin, pride warring with shame. Yes. Why? The simple question broke something inside her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that this stranger's eyes held no judgment, only genuine confusion. Maybe it was because she'd been holding everything together for 3 days and this was the first time anyone had asked her why. "Because I can't afford to pay someone else to do it," she said, her voice cracking. "My mother died 3 days ago, and I don't have the money for a funeral or burial services, and this section allows for self-dig if you can't pay. So here I am, digging my mother's grave with my own hands because that's all I have left to give her." The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, and Maya was horrified to feel fresh tears spilling down her already dirty face. The man stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he shrugged off his expensive suit jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves. "What are you doing?" Maya asked, confused. "Helping," he said simply. He looked around, spotted her second shovel, the one she'd borrowed from her downstairs neighbor, lying in the grass. He picked it up, tested its weight, then jumped down into the grave beside her. The space was cramped with 2 people. They stood close enough that Maya could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle, mixed with the earth and her own sweat. He was tall enough that his shoulders were well above ground level, and Maya suddenly felt the absurdity of the situation. A man in what was probably a $5,000 suit, standing in a half-dug grave at dawn, preparing to help a complete stranger bury her mother. "You don't have to do this," Maya said. "I don't even know who you are." "Dominic Ferrara," he said, extending his hand despite the dirt and blood. "And you're right, I don't have to. But my mother is buried 50 feet away, and if I'd been in your position when she died, if I'd had to dig her grave with my own hands, I would have wanted someone to help me. So I'm helping you." Maya shook his hand, feeling the calluses that suggested this man, despite his obvious wealth, knew what hard work felt like. "Maya Chen." "Nice to meet you, Maya Chen," Dominic said, and then he drove his shovel into the earth with practiced efficiency. They worked in silence as the sun rose properly over Chicago, painting the cemetery in shades of gold and amber. Maya had expected awkwardness, but instead, she found rhythm. Dominic worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that some tasks required completion, regardless of comfort or convenience. Every few minutes, he would haul himself out of the hole, lifting the excess dirt and distributing it evenly around the gravesite. Maya watched him work, noticing details. The way other expensive cars began arriving at the cemetery's main entrance, but none approached this forgotten section. The way his phone buzzed repeatedly in his jacket pocket, but he ignored it completely. The way his jaw tightened when he glanced toward his mother's grave, as if even being near it caused physical pain. "How long has she been gone?" Maya asked during one of their brief water breaks. She'd brought a single bottle, which they shared without comment. 5 years today, Dominic answered, his gaze distant. 5 years, and it doesn't get easier. People tell you time heals, but that's a lie they tell so you'll stop making them uncomfortable with your grief. Maya nodded, understanding completely. "My mother died in our kitchen. I was at work. She was making dumplings for my lunch the next day, and her heart just stopped. The neighbor found her 6 hours later when I called asking why Mom wasn't answering her phone." "I'm sorry," Dominic said, and the words carried the weight of someone who understood that sorry meant nothing and everything simultaneously. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. They returned to digging. The hole grew deeper. 4 feet. 5 feet. Maya's arms screamed with exhaustion, but Dominic never slowed, never suggested stopping. Around them, the cemetery came to life with the morning, groundskeepers in the distance, early visitors to more prosperous graves. But no one ventured into Section D, where the forgotten dead rested and a strange partnership unfolded in the dawn light. At 5.5 feet, Dominic stopped and climbed out, then extended his hand to help Maya up. She took it, feeling the strength in his grip as he pulled her from the grave they'd created together. "It's deep enough," he said. "Your mother will rest well here." Maya looked at the hole, at the pile of earth beside it, at her bleeding hands and Dominic's dirt-stained shirt. Then she looked at his face and saw something shift in his expression. A decision being made. "When is the burial?" he asked. "Tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. I couldn't afford a casket, so I built a simple box from plywood. My neighbor helped. It's not much, but it's what I can do." Dominic pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts with purpose. "What funeral home has your mother?" "Riverside Memorial. But I can't afford their services, so I'm just having them transport her here tomorrow. I'll say the words myself." "Give me until tomorrow," Dominic said, his tone leaving no room for argument. 2 o'clock, you said? "Yes, but trust me," he interrupted gently. "Your mother worked 3 jobs so you could have better. Let me make sure her final rest is what she deserved." Before Maya could protest, before she could explain that she couldn't accept charity from a stranger no matter how kind, Dominic was already making calls. His voice shifted as he spoke into the phone, from the gentle tone he'd used with her to something else entirely. Command, authority, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Riverside Memorial, this is Dominic Ferrara. You have a client named Lin Chen. I need a full service arranged for tomorrow at 2 p.m., Oakwood Cemetery, Section D. "Yes, I know Section D doesn't usually receive full services. Make it happen. Casket, flowers, proper burial services, everything. Cost is irrelevant. Charge it to the Ferrara Family Foundation account." He paused, listening, his jaw tightening at whatever response he received. "I don't care what your policies are. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Lin Chen will be buried tomorrow with full honors, or I'll make one phone call and your funeral home will find its business licenses under very intensive review. Am I making myself clear?" Another pause. Then Dominic's expression softened slightly. "Good. 2 p.m. Don't be late." He ended the call and turned back to Maya, who stood frozen in shock. "What did you just do?" "I made sure your mother gets the funeral she deserved," Dominic said simply. "Consider it a gift from one grieving child to another." "I can't accept this," Maya protested, even as hope and relief warred with pride in her chest. "I don't know you. I can't take your money." "You're not taking anything," Dominic corrected. "I'm giving it. There's a difference. And you can refuse, but then tomorrow Riverside Memorial will show up anyway because I've already paid, and your mother's body will be here, and you'll have a choice. Accept help from a stranger who understands your pain, or waste resources out of pride." Maya opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right, and more than that, she was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of carrying everything alone, tired of the constant calculation of which bills could wait and which demanded immediate payment. "Why?" she asked instead. "Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" Dominic looked back toward his mother's grave, that well-maintained marble monument that stood in stark contrast to the weathered stones surrounding it. "Because 5 years ago, when my mother died, I had all the money in the world to give her a funeral that would have made queens jealous. But what I didn't have was time. I was too busy building an empire, too focused on proving myself, too consumed with my own ambitions to visit her in the hospital as often as I should have. She died surrounded by nurses and doctors, not by her son." His voice cracked slightly, the first real break in his composure. "I can't fix what I failed to do for my mother. But I can make sure your mother, who worked 3 jobs and made dumplings for her daughter's lunch, gets the dignity in death that she earned in life. So let me do this. Not for you. For me. Because I need to believe that somewhere, someone showed up for my mother in the moments I didn't." Maya felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they weren't just grief. They were gratitude, relief, and the overwhelming recognition of being seen, truly seen, by someone who understood the particular weight of loving a mother fiercely and losing her anyway. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know how to thank you enough. Show up tomorrow, Dominic said. That's all. Just be there for her. He walked back to his SUV, retrieving his jacket and brushing dirt from his ruined pants with complete unconcern for the damage. Before getting in the vehicle, he pulled out a business card and brought it back to Maya. My number, he said. If there are any problems with Riverside Memorial, or if you need anything else, call me directly. Maya looked at the card. Simple, elegant lettering. Dominic Ferrara, and a phone number. Nothing else. No business title, no company name. As if his name alone was sufficient identification. I will, she promised. Dominic nodded, then hesitated, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. Your mother raised a daughter who would dig a grave with her own hands to honor her. That's not weakness, Maya. That's the kind of strength most people never find. Then he was gone, the black SUV navigating back through the narrow paths until it disappeared beyond the cemetery gates. Maya stood beside the grave they'd dug together, watching the sun rise fully over Chicago, and for the first time in 3 days, she felt like she could breathe. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of phone calls and impossible logistics that somehow resolved themselves with efficiency Maya had never experienced. Riverside Memorial called 3 times, each conversation more deferential than the last, confirming arrangements that sounded far more elaborate than anything Maya had imagined. Miss Chen, we'll be providing our premium mahogany casket with silk interior lining, the funeral director had explained, his voice nervous. Full floral arrangements, a viewing tent with seating for 50 guests, a minister if you'd like one, and our complete burial service package, Mr. Ferrara has taken care of everything. Maya had simply nodded, unable to form words around the lump in her throat. Now, standing in her tiny apartment bathroom, she stared at herself in the mirror. The black dress she wore had been her mother's, kept in the back of the closet for formal occasions that rarely came. It smelled faintly of the lavender sachets her mother had loved, and wearing it felt like being wrapped in a final embrace. Her hands were bandaged from yesterday's digging, white gauze standing out starkly against the black fabric. She'd tried to hide them with long sleeves, but the evidence of what she'd done remained visible, a badge of devotion that felt both shameful and sacred. The knock on her door came at exactly 1 p.m. Maya opened it to find a young woman in a professional black suit, holding a clipboard and offering a gentle smile. Miss Chen? I'm Rebecca from Riverside Memorial. Mr. Ferrara arranged for a car to take you to the cemetery. It's waiting downstairs whenever you're ready. A car? Maya repeated, confused. Yes, ma'am. He thought you shouldn't have to drive yourself today. Maya grabbed her mother's worn purse, the one Lynn had carried for 15 years because good quality leather lasts forever, and followed Rebecca down 3 flights of stairs to where a town car idled at the curb. Not a limousine, nothing ostentatious, just a quiet, dignified sedan with a driver who opened the door with respectful silence. The drive to Oakwood Cemetery took 20 minutes through Chicago's afternoon traffic. Maya watched the city pass by her window, neighborhoods transitioning from her working-class area to more prosperous districts, then back again as they approached the old cemetery. She'd made this journey countless times to visit her grandmother's grave with her mother, never imagining she'd be making it for Lynn. The cemetery gates came into view, and Maya's breath caught. Section D, that forgotten corner where yesterday she'd been alone with a shovel and her grief, had been transformed. A white tent stood over the grave she and Dominic had dug, its fabric pristine against the weathered headstones surrounding it. Beneath it sat rows of chairs, and at the grave's edge was a mahogany casket so beautiful it seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Flowers covered every surface, white lilies, her mother's favorite, arranged in sprays and wreaths that must have cost more than Maya made in a month. But it was the people that made Maya's throat close with emotion. At least 30 people stood in small clusters around the tent. Her neighbors from the apartment building, still in their work clothes because they'd taken time off to come. Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs, who'd helped build the plywood box Maya thought her mother would be buried in. The night shift nurses from the hospital where Maya worked, still in their scrubs. Her mother's friends from the farmer's market, the community of vendors who'd shared Lynn's weekend mornings for years, and standing slightly apart from the others, near his mother's marble monument, was Dominic Ferrara. He'd changed from yesterday's ruined suit into another one, this one black and perfectly tailored. But it was his expression that struck Maya, the careful blankness that didn't quite hide the satisfaction of seeing his promise fulfilled. The car stopped, and Rebecca opened Maya's door, offering a hand to help her out. Maya's legs felt unsteady as she walked toward the gathering, toward the impossible gift that had appeared in less than 24 hours. Mrs. Rodriguez reached her first, pulling Maya into a fierce hug. "Mija, it's beautiful. Your mother would be so proud." "I didn't do this," Maya whispered. "I couldn't afford any of this." "But you would have, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "You would have done anything for her. That's what matters." The funeral director from Riverside Memorial approached, no longer nervous but quietly efficient. "Miss Chen, we're ready to begin whenever you are. We have a minister, unless you'd prefer. To speak yourself?" Maya glanced toward Dominic, who gave a slight nod. "Permission? Or perhaps encouragement?" "I'll speak," Maya said. "But thank you." She moved to stand at the head of her mother's casket, this beautiful final resting place that represented everything Lynn had never had in life: luxury, ease, the acknowledgement that her existence mattered. Maya's bandaged hands rested on the polished wood, and she let herself remember. "My mother came to America with nothing," she began, her voice carrying across the small gathering. She was 19 years old, spoke almost no English, and had exactly $300 in her pocket. She worked in restaurants, in factories, cleaning houses, sewing clothes, whatever it took to build a life here. The crowd was silent, except for the soft rustle of wind through the tent. "When I was born, the doctors told her I had a heart murmur. They said I might need surgery, might have complications. The medical bills were impossible. But my mother worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, and made sure I got the care I needed. She made sure I survived." Maya's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "She put me through nursing school by making dumplings at the farmer's market every weekend. She sewed alterations at night so I could have textbooks. She cleaned houses during the day so I wouldn't have to work and could focus on studying. Everything she did, every sacrifice she made, was so I could have a better life than she'd had." Tears were flowing freely now, down Maya's face, and down the faces of many in the crowd. 3 days ago, she died alone in our kitchen while I was at the hospital, taking care of other people's mothers. I wasn't there when she needed me. I failed her in that moment. "No, Mija," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. "You were doing what she raised you to do, caring for others. That's not failure." Maya looked at the faces surrounding her mother's casket: neighbors, friends, co-workers, and one stranger who had somehow understood what this moment required. "Yesterday morning, I came to this cemetery with a shovel because I couldn't afford to have someone else dig my mother's grave. I was alone, exhausted, and ashamed that this was all I could give the woman who gave me everything." She looked directly at Dominic, whose expression remained carefully neutral, but whose eyes held that familiar weight of shared understanding. And then someone showed up. Someone who didn't know my mother or me. Someone who had his own grief to carry. But he picked up a shovel and helped me dig. And then he did something even more incredible. He made sure my mother's final rest would honor the life she lived, the sacrifices she made, the love she gave so freely. Maya turned back to the casket, placing both bandaged hands on its surface. "Mom, I know you would have said this was too much, that it was too expensive, too fancy, that we should have saved the money for something practical. But you, I spent your entire life making sure I had what I needed. Today, someone made sure you got what you deserved, not because he owed you anything, but because kindness still exists in this world. Because your life mattered, because the way you loved me mattered." She kissed her bandaged hand and pressed it to the casket. "Rest now, Mama. Your work is done. You raised me well. And I promise I'll make every sacrifice you made mean something. I'll live the life you worked so hard to give me. I'll be the person you believed I could be." The minister stepped forward then, offering prayers in English and Chinese that Maya's mother would have appreciated. The words washed over the gathering as the afternoon sun filtered through the tent's white fabric, creating a sanctuary of light and shadow over Lin Chen's final resting place. When it came time to lower the casket, Dominic was there, one of 6 men who'd volunteered to bear the weight. Maya watched this stranger handle her mother's casket with the same gentle reverence he'd shown at his own mother's grave, and something shifted inside her chest. Gratitude, yes, but also recognition of something deeper. Connection forged in the crucible of shared loss. The mourners filed past after the burial, each offering condolences and memories. Maya heard stories about her mother she'd never known, how Lynn had helped Mrs. Rodriguez learn English when she'd first immigrated, how she'd sewn a wedding dress for free for a young vendor at the market who couldn't afford one, how she'd brought dumplings to Maya's co-workers on their birthday shifts. Her mother had been quietly generous in ways Maya had never fully understood, giving from the little she had because that's what love looked like to Lynn Chen. When the last mourner had left, when the funeral home staff had packed up their chairs and equipment, Maya found herself alone in Section D, except for Dominic, who stood by his mother's grave, giving her space but not leaving entirely. She walked over to him, her bandaged hands clasped in front of her black dress. "I don't know how to thank you," she said simply. "There aren't words big enough." "You don't need to thank me," Dominic replied. "Seeing her honored properly is thanks enough." "Can I ask you something?" Maya ventured. "Your mother's grave, it's so well maintained. You clearly loved her very much. So why do you look so haunted when you're here?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the marble monument bearing his mother's name, Isabella Ferrara, 1962 to 2020. "Beloved mother and light of our lives. Because love and presence aren't the same thing," he finally said. "I loved my mother desperately, but I was building a business empire when she got sick. I was making deals and expanding territory and proving I was worthy of the family legacy. I visited her in the hospital, yes, but not enough. Not nearly enough." His voice dropped lower. "The night she died, I was in a meeting. An important meeting that couldn't be rescheduled, or so I told myself. She called 3 times. I sent her to voicemail 3 times because I was discussing quarterly projections. She died 20 minutes after that 3rd call. Alone in a hospital room, trying to reach her son who was too busy for her. Maya's hand found his arm without thought, a nurse's instinct to comfort pain even when words were inadequate. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's a heavy weight to carry." "It is," Dominic agreed. "Which is why when I saw you yesterday, digging your mother's grave with your own hands, bleeding through your gloves, exhausted but determined to give her what you could, I saw everything I wasn't, everything I should have been." He turned to face Maya fully. "You were there for your mother in every way that mattered until the very end. You honored her with your presence, your sacrifice, your love. The fact that you couldn't afford an expensive funeral doesn't diminish any of that. If anything, what you were willing to do makes it more meaningful." "I still wish I'd been there when she died," Maya whispered. "She knew you loved her," Dominic said with certainty. "That's what matters. She died knowing she'd raised a daughter who would dig a grave with her own hands rather than let her mother rest without dignity. Trust me, as a son who failed that test, I know the difference." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people connected by loss, and the particular understanding that comes from surviving it. "Can I ask you something now?" Dominic said after a moment. "Of course. What will you do now? Your mother worked 3 jobs to put you through nursing school, and from what I gathered at the funeral, you're working brutal hours at Detroit Memorial. What happens next for Maya Chen?" The question was more complicated than he knew. Maya looked at the grave they'd dug together, now filled and covered with flowers. "Honestly, I don't know. My mother left. Medical debt I'm still trying to pay off. The apartment rent is due in 2 weeks, and I'm already behind. I pick up every overtime shift I can, but it's never quite enough. I'm treading water in the middle of an ocean, and I can feel myself getting tired." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "My mother sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities she never had, and I'm using those opportunities to work myself into exhaustion just to barely survive. It feels like I'm failing the gift she gave me." Dominic pulled out his phone, scrolling through something before turning the screen toward Maya. "Ferrara Medical Center is opening a new wing next month. We need experienced nurses, especially for the emergency department. The pay is 40% above market rate, full benefits, education assistance if you want to pursue advanced degrees, and reasonable hours, no mandatory overtime." Maya stared at the job posting, her mind struggling to process what he was offering. "You're hiring me?" "I'm offering you an interview," Dominic corrected. "But yes, if you're qualified, and I suspect you are, the job is yours. Consider it an investment in someone who understands the value of hard work and sacrifice, qualities my hospitals need more of." "Hospitals? Plural?" Maya asked, suddenly realizing she'd never actually asked what Dominic did, what empire he'd been building when his mother died. The Ferrara family owns 17 hospitals across the Midwest, Dominic explained, among other businesses. Medical care is our primary focus, though we have interests in real estate, construction, and various other sectors. The scope of his wealth and influence suddenly became clear. This wasn't just a successful businessman who'd helped her out of kindness. This was someone who operated on a completely different level of power and resources. Why would someone like you help someone like me? Maya asked, the question emerging before she could stop it. You don't know, me. For all you know, I could be a terrible nurse. Dominic's expression softened. Because 5 years ago, I made a promise to myself standing at my mother's grave. I promised that I would try to be the kind of person she raised me to be, not the person I'd become in pursuit of success. I would use the resources I'd built to help people who reminded me what actually matters. He gestured toward Lin Chen's flower-covered grave. Your mother worked herself to exhaustion so you could have better opportunities. Giving you one of those opportunities isn't charity, Maya. It's investment in the kind of person this world needs more of. Someone who would dig a grave with their own hands rather than let their parent rest without dignity. Maya felt tears threatening again, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough for one day. I'll take the interview, she said, and I'll earn whatever position you give me. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Dominic said with quiet certainty. He handed her another card, different from the simple one with just his phone number. This one had the Ferrara Medical Center logo and contact information. Call Monday morning. Ask for Dr. Maya Chen, no relation. I assume she's the head of emergency services. Tell her we spoke. She'll arrange everything. Dr. Chen, Maya repeated, memorizing the name. Monday morning. They walked together toward the cemetery gates, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the weathered headstones. At the entrance, Dominic's town car waited, and Maya realized her ride had long since departed. Can I give you a lift home? Dominic offered, reading her hesitation. I don't want to impose more than I already have. Maya, Dominic said gently, you dug a grave with me at dawn. We're past the point of formal politeness. Get in the car. The drive back to Maya's apartment took them through Chicago's late afternoon traffic, the city bustling with people heading home from work, going about their normal routines while Maya's entire world had shifted on its axis. Can I tell you something? Maya said as they navigated through downtown. When I saw you yesterday at the cemetery, I was terrified. You looked so dangerous, like someone I should run from, not trust. Dominic smiled slightly, the first real smile she'd seen from him. That's perceptive of you. I am dangerous, in some ways. The business world I operate in doesn't reward softness, but danger and cruelty aren't the same thing. My mother taught me that, even if I forgot it for a while. What changed? Maya asked. What made you remember? She did, Dominic said, nodding toward the cemetery they were leaving behind. 5 years ago today, I buried my mother and realized I'd buried the best part of myself with her. The part that knew success means nothing if you're alone with it. The part that understood kindness isn't weakness, it's the hardest form of strength. The car pulled up to Maya's building, its shabby exterior, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicle idling at the curb. But Dominic's expression held no judgment, only the same understanding he'd shown from the beginning. Thank you, Maya said as the driver opened her door. For everything, for digging with me, for honoring my mother, for the job opportunity, for showing up when I needed someone most. Thank you, Dominic replied, surprising her. For reminding me why I made that promise 5 years ago. For showing me what it looks like to honor a parent's sacrifice with every action, not just expensive monuments and flowers. Maya stepped out of the car, then paused, leaning back in. Will I see you again? Besides the interview, I mean? Dominic's expression shifted, something unreadable passing across his features. That depends on whether you take the job. And whether you can handle working in a hospital system owned by someone like me, someone who operates in both legitimate business and in spaces that are less legitimate. The warning was clear. Dominic Ferrara was offering her an opportunity, but it came with complicated strings attached. I spent yesterday digging a grave with you, Maya said. I think I can handle complicated. We'll see, Dominic said, and there was something almost like hope in his voice. The car pulled away, leaving Maya standing on the sidewalk outside her apartment building. She watched until it disappeared into Chicago traffic, then climbed the 3 flights to her empty apartment, where her mother's absence echoed from every corner. But for the first time in 3 days, Maya felt like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe again. like maybe the future Lin Chen had worked so hard to give her daughter was still possible. She set Dominic's business card on her small kitchen table, right where her mother used to leave notes, reminding Maya to eat properly and rest when she could. "I did it, Mom," Maya whispered to the empty apartment. "I honored you the best way I knew how, and someone helped me do it. Someone who understood." Outside her window, Chicago settled into evening, the city lights flickering on one by one like stars emerging from darkness. Tomorrow would bring challenges, rent still due, bills still unpaid, grief still raw and overwhelming. But tomorrow would also bring a phone call to Dr. Maya Chen, a job interview at Ferrara Medical Center, the beginning of something new emerging from the ashes of loss. Maya changed out of her mother's black dress, hanging it carefully in the closet where Lynn had kept it for special occasions. This qualified, she thought. Saying goodbye to the woman who'd given her everything qualified as the most special occasion of all. She heated up leftover dumplings Mrs. Rodriguez had brought over, the familiar taste connecting her to her mother across the divide of death. Lynn had made these exact dumplings hundreds of times, the recipe perfected through years of weekend markets and family meals. As Maya ate, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I forgot to mention your mother's medical debt has been paid in full. Consider it part of the funeral expenses. You start your new life with a clean slate, the way she would have wanted. DF." Maya stared at the message, tears flowing freely now. Not just from grief, but from overwhelming gratitude and the recognition that sometimes, in the darkest moments, unexpected kindness arrived in the form of a stranger with his own ghosts to carry. She typed a response. "Thank you. I won't waste the gift you've given me." His reply came immediately. "It's not a gift. It's an investment. Your mother invested everything in you. I'm simply continuing her work." Maya set down her phone and finished her dumplings in silence, feeling her mother's presence in the familiar taste, in the empty apartment that still smelled faintly of lavender and love. Tomorrow would begin her transformation from Maya Chen, struggling nurse drowning in debt, to Maya Chen, emergency department nurse at one of Chicago's premier medical centers. The journey her mother had started with nothing but determination, and $300 would continue, carried forward by a daughter who'd learned that love sometimes required digging graves with your own hands, and by a stranger who'd learned that redemption sometimes meant helping others honor the parents they'd loved and lost. The following Monday, Maya stood outside Ferrara Medical Center at 7 a.m. sharp, her worn scrubs replaced with new ones she'd purchased specifically for this interview. The building rose 15 stories above Chicago's medical district, glass and steel catching the morning sun with almost blinding intensity. The scope of what Dominic Ferrara actually controlled became clearer as she walked through the main entrance. This wasn't just a hospital, it was a monument to medical excellence, with marble floors, original artwork on the walls, and staff moving with the efficient precision of a well-funded, well-managed operation. "Maya Chen?" a woman's voice called out. Maya turned to see an Asian woman in her 40s, wearing scrubs under a white coat, approaching with a warm smile. "I'm Dr. Maya Chen. Dominic told me to expect you." "Thank you for seeing me," Maya said, shaking her hand. "Let's talk in my office, Doctor," Chen said, leading Maya through corridors that gleamed with cleanliness and efficiency. "Dominic doesn't usually make personal referrals, so when he called about you, I paid attention." They entered a spacious office overlooking the city, and Dr. Chen gestured for Maya to sit. "Tell me about yourself," she began. "Not your resume. I've already reviewed that. Tell me why you're a nurse." Maya thought about her mother, about dumplings and farmers markets, and 3 jobs worked simultaneously. About digging a grave at dawn, and a stranger who'd shown up with a shovel and unexpected understanding. "I'm a nurse because my mother worked herself to exhaustion so I could have opportunities she never had," Maya said honestly. "She taught me that love is action, not just feeling. That showing up for people in their darkest moments is what makes us human. I became a nurse to honor that lesson, to show up for others the way she always showed up for me." "Doctor." Chen nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. "Dominic mentioned you buried your mother last Friday. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. He also mentioned you were digging her grave yourself when he found you. Is that true?" Maya lifted her still bandaged hands. "Yes. I couldn't afford the cemetery's services, so I was doing it myself. He helped me finish." Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying Maya with new intensity. "Do you know what Dominic actually does, beyond owning hospitals?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications Maya hadn't fully considered. "I know he's wealthy and powerful," Maya said carefully. "I know he has influence across multiple industries, and I know he carries his own grief about his mother. Beyond that, I didn't ask for details." "That's wise," Dr. Chen said. "The Ferrara family has extensive legitimate business interests, but they also have connections and operations that exist in gray areas of the law. Working at this hospital means occasionally treating patients who can't go to regular facilities. It means asking few questions and maintaining absolute discretion." She pulled out a contract, sliding it across the desk toward Maya. "This is an employment offer for our emergency department. The salary is exactly what Dominic promised, 40% above market rate. Full benefits, education assistance, reasonable hours. But there's a clause here about confidentiality that goes beyond standard medical privacy. You'll be required to sign an NDA about anything you see or hear that relates to Ferrara family business." Maya scanned the contract, her nursing training allowing her to quickly parse the legal language. Everything Dr. Chen had described was there in black and white. "What kind of patients are we talking about?" Maya asked. "Sometimes people who've been injured in circumstances they can't explain to police. Sometimes people who need medical care but don't exist in official databases. Sometimes people who work for Dominic and get hurt doing things I don't ask about." Dr. Chen's expression was serious but not unkind. "I won't lie to you, Maya. This job comes with complications, but it also comes with the opportunity to provide excellent care to people who genuinely need it, regardless of their circumstances. Dominic built this medical center because he believes everyone deserves quality health care, even people society has forgotten or pushed into shadows." Maya thought about Section D of Oakwood Cemetery, where the forgotten dead rested in unmarked graves. She thought about her mother, who'd worked in society's margins for decades, invisible to everyone except the people she'd helped. "My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families who never knew her name," Maya said slowly. "She sewed alterations for people who never thanked her. She existed in the spaces between proper society and the people who keep it running. If this job means providing care to people in those same spaces, then I understand what's being asked." She picked up the pen Dr. Chen had placed beside the contract. "Where do I sign?" 3 months into her position at Ferrara Medical Center, Maya Chen had learned to recognize the pattern. The quiet emergency calls that came through a separate line. The patients who arrived through the private entrance with no intake paperwork. The injuries that told stories no one would speak aloud. She'd treated a 19-year-old girl with cigarette burns covering her arms, rescued from a trafficking operation. A man with 3 bullet wounds who spoke no English and he carried no identification. A teenager overdosing on fentanyl, brought in by people who disappeared before Maya could thank them for saving the kid's life. Each case existed in the shadow space Dr. Chen had described people who needed help but couldn't access traditional systems. And each time, Maya provided care without judgment, without questions, with only the compassion her mother had modeled throughout her life. The work was exhausting but meaningful in ways her previous hospital job had never been. She wasn't just treating symptoms. She was providing dignity to people society had discarded. It was a Tuesday evening, her shift nearly over, when the call came through the private line. "Incoming trauma," the voice said tersely. "GSW to the abdomen, significant blood loss. ETA 4 minutes. Dr. Chen is scrubbing in now." Maya's training kicked in immediately. She prepped the trauma bay, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. GSW gunshot wound meant this was serious, possibly fatal if they didn't move fast. The doors burst open exactly 4 minutes later. 2 men in black suits carried a third between them, blood soaking through the makeshift pressure bandages they'd applied. Maya's breath caught as she recognized the injured man being rushed toward her. Dominic Ferrara. His face was pale, his expensive suit jacket discarded somewhere, his white shirt more red than white now. But his eyes were open, conscious, and when they found Maya's face, something like relief flickered across his expression. "Gunshot wound to the right lower quadrant," one of the men reported, his voice clipped and professional despite obvious worry. "Approximately 20 minutes ago. He's lost a lot of blood." "Get him on the table," Maya commanded, her nurse's authority overriding her shock. "Now." They transferred Dominic with surprising gentleness, and Maya immediately began cutting away his shirt to assess the wound. Dr. Chen appeared at her shoulder, already gloved, and masked. "BP is dropping," Maya reported, reading the monitors. 90 over 60 and falling. Heart rate 140. We need blood. Type O negative. 4 units standing by. Get a line in, Dr. Chen ordered. Maya, I need you on this. Can you handle it? The question had layers. Can you handle seeing someone you know bleeding out on your table? Can you separate personal feelings from professional duty? Can you do what needs to be done? Yes, Maya said firmly, already establishing IV access with steady hands that betrayed none of her internal panic. Dominic's hand suddenly gripped her wrist, his strength surprising given his blood loss. Maya, he rasped. Listen to me. Save your strength, she told him, but he held on. Marco Castellano did this. Retaliation for the harbor deal. My men know. But if I don't make it, he coughed, blood flecking his lips. Tell them no war. Promise me, no war. You're not dying on my table, Maya said fiercely. So you can deliver that. Message yourself. Dr. Chen's hands were already working, probing the wound with efficient precision. Bullet's still in there. Looks like it missed major organs, but there's internal bleeding. We need to get him to surgery. Now. The next 2 hours existed in the suspended reality of emergency medicine. Maya assisted Dr. Chen through the surgery, her hands moving with practiced precision, even as her mind screamed that this was Dominic, the man who'd helped her dig her mother's grave, who'd given her this job, who'd shown her that kindness could exist even in darkness. She watched Dr. Chen extract the bullet, repair damaged tissue, cauterize bleeding vessels. She monitored vitals, adjusted medications, anticipated needs before Dr. Chen could voice them. She did her job with the excellence her mother had sacrificed everything to make possible. When they finally wheeled Dominic to recovery, his condition stabilized but still critical, Maya found herself in the scrub room, shaking with delayed reaction. Dr. Chen appeared beside her, stripping off her surgical gloves. You did good work in there. Your mother would be proud. He could have died, Maya whispered. Right there on my table. The man who saved me could have died because someone shot him over a business deal. But he didn't die, Dr. Chen said firmly. He's alive because you did your job, because you showed up when he needed you, just like he showed up for you 3 months ago. Maya looked at her mentor with new understanding. You've done this before. Treated him when he's been hurt. Twice in the 5 years I've worked here, Doctor. Chen confirmed. The Ferrara family operates in dangerous spaces, Maya. Dominic has tried to legitimize the business, to move away from his father's violent legacy. But there are people who don't want that change, people who see his compassion as weakness to exploit. She placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. What you saw tonight is the reality of working here. We save lives that exist outside society's clean lines. We provide care to people engaged in messy, complicated, sometimes violent situations. You can't let that knowledge paralyze you. You just have to keep showing up and doing the work. Maya nodded, finding her center again. Can I sit with him? In recovery? I think he'd appreciate that, Doctor, Chen said. The recovery room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Dominic lay motionless, his face pale against white sheets, IV lines running into both arms. Maya pulled a chair beside his bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the pulse ox monitor on his finger. You're not allowed to die, she told his unconscious form. Not after everything you've done. Not after showing me that people like you exist, people who use their power to help instead of harm. His fingers twitched in her grasp, and his eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding her face. Maya, he said, his voice rough from the breathing tube. You're here. Of course I'm here. You got shot and ended up in my trauma bay. Where else would I be? A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Fair point. He tried to sit up, then groaned and fell back against the pillows. Don't move, Maya commanded. Dr. Chen spent 2 hours putting you back together. Don't undo her work by being stupid. Noted. Dominic's expression sobered. Did I tell you about Marco Castellano? Yes. You said no war. What does that mean? Dominic closed his eyes briefly. It means that when someone in my world gets hurt, the expected response is retaliation. Violence answered with violence, until everyone's dead or imprisoned. That's how my father operated. That's how this business has always operated. But not how you want to operate, Maya guessed. I've spent 5 years trying to build something different, using my family's resources to create legitimate businesses, to provide services to communities other organizations exploit. The hospitals, The construction company that hires ex-cons, the community centers in neighborhoods everyone else abandoned. His hand tightened on hers. Marco Castellano is old guard. He sees my approach as betrayal of tradition. The harbor development deal I negotiated would have brought jobs and infrastructure to the south side. He wanted to keep it as territory for drugs and prostitution. So he sent a message. By shooting you, Maya said, anger rising in her chest. By trying to kill me, yes. But if my people retaliate, we're right back where my father left things. Endless war, more bodies, more violence, more mothers burying sons who died for pride and territory. Dominic's voice was passionate despite his weakness. I can't let that happen. Even if Marco thinks he won, even if he thinks I'm weak for not responding with violence, I have to find another way. Maya studied his face, seeing the weight he carried trying to transform a criminal empire into something legitimate while enemies on all sides saw that transformation as weakness. What's the other way? She asked. I don't know yet, Dominic admitted. But I know violence isn't it. My mother spent her whole life trying to pull me away from the darkness. I can't dishonor her memory by diving back in just because someone hurt me. The door opened, and one of the men who'd brought Dominic in stepped inside. He was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and a face that had seen too much violence. Boss, he said, relief evident in his voice. Good to see you awake. Vincent, Dominic acknowledged. The men? Restless. They want blood for this. Marco's people are already bragging about putting you down. If we don't respond, we don't respond with violence, Dominic interrupted firmly. We respond by finishing the harbor deal, by proving that bullets can't stop progress, by showing Marco that the old ways are dying whether he likes it or not. Vincent's jaw tightened. With respect, boss, the men won't accept that. They'll see it as weakness. You'll lose their loyalty. Then I'll lose their loyalty, Dominic said flatly. But I won't be responsible for starting a war that kills people just to prove I'm tough enough. There has to be another way, and we're going to find it. Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but he glanced at Maya and seemed to reconsider. We'll talk when you're stronger, he said finally, then left. Maya waited until the door closed. He's right, isn't he? Your people expect you to retaliate. Yes, Dominic agreed. But expectations aren't destiny. My mother taught me that. Sometimes being strong means choosing the harder path, not the familiar one. Over the next 2 days, Maya watched a different side of Dominic emerge. Business associates came and went, each conversation tense with the unspoken question of retaliation. City officials visited, offering carefully worded support for his recovery. Community leaders from the south side arrived, bringing prayers and gratitude for the harbor project that was transforming their neighborhood. And through it all, Dominic held firm. No retaliation, no violence. Just continued work on the legitimate projects that were slowly transforming his empire from criminal organization to community foundation. Maya found herself spending more time in his room than strictly necessary for a nurse. They talked during her breaks about everything and nothing. His childhood growing up in a family business he never wanted to inherit. Her mother's journey from China with nothing but hope and determination. Your mother and mine would have liked each other, Dominic said during one late-night conversation when sleep eluded him despite the pain medication. Strong women who understood that love sometimes means sacrifice. Your mother wanted you out of the family business? Maya asked. Desperately. She used to tell me that power and violence aren't the same thing. That real strength is building something that survives without you, not controlling something through fear. His expression turned distant. When she was dying, she made me promise to transform the business. To use our resources to help people instead of exploit them. That's why I started the hospitals, the community centers. All of it. I'm trying to wash the blood off this empire before it consumes me completely. It's working, Maya said softly. I see it every day. The patients we treat here, the lives we save, that's real. That matters. But it's not enough if I lose control to people like Marco, who want to drag us back into darkness, Dominic said, frustration evident. I'm trying to build a bridge to legitimacy, but half my own people don't want to cross it. The door burst open suddenly. Vincent appeared, his face grim. We have a problem. Dominic sat up despite Maya's protest. What kind of problem? Marco's people just firebombed the Southside Community Center, the one we opened last month. 3 staff members were inside, they made it out, but the building's destroyed. Maya felt Dominic tense beside her, saw his jaw clench with the effort of controlling his rage. "Casualties?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. "Minor injuries, smoke inhalation. But the message is clear, he's escalating. He's not just coming after you. He's targeting everything you've built." The room fell silent except for the monitors tracking Dominic's vitals. Maya watched his heart rate increase, saw the fury and calculation warring across his features. "Get me out of this bed," Dominic said finally. "We need to meet. All the captains, all the senior leadership. Now. You were shot 2 days ago," Maya protested. "You can't." "I can and I will," Dominic interrupted, not unkindly. "Because if I stay in this bed while Marco destroys everything we've built, I'll lose more than buildings. I'll lose the faith of everyone who believed in this transformation." He looked at Vincent. "Conference room, 2 hours. Tell them I'm coming." After Vincent left, Maya helped Dominic sit up fully, her hands gentle on his bandaged abdomen. "This is a mistake. You need more recovery time." "Life doesn't wait for convenient timing," Dominic said, echoing words her mother had often spoken. "Sometimes you have to show up hurt and bleeding because the alternative is worse." She understood. It was the same principle that had driven her mother to work 3 jobs despite exhaustion, that had driven Maya to dig a grave with her own hands. Sometimes love and duty demanded more than you thought you could give. "Let me help you dress," Maya said. "And I'm coming with you." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "This is a meeting of captains discussing how to handle a threat. You don't need to be involved. You don't need to be standing, but you're doing it anyway," Maya countered. "Someone should be there to make sure you don't collapse from stubborn stupidity. That someone is me." Despite everything, Dominic smiled. "You sound like my mother. She never accepted excuses either. Then she and my mother definitely would have gotten along." 2 hours later, Maya stood in the back of a conference room on Ferrara Medical Center's top floor, watching as a dozen men filed in. They were Dominic's captains, the leaders of his various operations, and their expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. Dominic sat at the head of the table, his pallor evident but his posture commanding. Vincent stood at his right hand, protective and watchful. "Gentlemen," Dominic began, "by now you've all heard about the community center. Marco Castellano has made his position clear. He sees our transformation as weakness, our community investment as betrayal of tradition. He wants war. Then we give him war," one of the captains said, a heavy-set man named Tony who'd been with the family for decades. "We hit his operations hard. Show him what happens when you come after the Ferraras." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "No," Dominic said quietly, but with absolute authority. "We don't." The murmurs turned to protests. Tony stood, his face red with anger. "With respect, boss, you're showing weakness. Marco shoots you, firebombs our property, and we do nothing? The other families will see that as invitation. We'll be picked apart." "We won't do nothing," Dominic corrected. "We'll rebuild the community center, bigger and better. We'll double our investment in the Southside Harbor project. We'll show Marco that his violence achieves the opposite of what he intends. It makes us stronger, not weaker." "That's not how this world works," another captain argued. "Violence is the only language these people understand. Then maybe it's time we taught them a new language," Dominic said, his voice hardening. "My father ran this organization through fear and brutality. Where did it get him? Dead at 52 from a stress-induced heart attack, surrounded by enemies, with a son who hated what he'd become. He stood, despite the obvious pain it caused, commanding the room's attention. "I've spent 5 years building something different. Hospitals that serve communities other facilities ignore. Construction companies that hire people no one else will touch. Community centers that give kids alternatives to the life we lead. Real estate developments that create jobs instead of displacement." Dominic's hands pressed against the table, supporting his weight. "Marco can burn buildings. He can't burn ideas. He can shoot me, and he tried, but he can't kill the transformation we've started. Unless we kill it ourselves by responding with the same violence that's defined this life for generations." "Pretty words," Tony said bitterly. "But while you're rebuilding and talking about transformation, Marco's people are laughing at us, calling us weak, soft. How long before our own people start believing it?" "Let them believe what they want," Dominic said. "Actions speak, louder than reputation. We're going to finish every project we've started. The harbor development, the new hospital wing, the job training center. We're going to prove that building something lasting is harder than destroying it and more powerful." The room erupted in argument, voices overlapping as captains debated Dominic's approach. Maya watched from the back, seeing the fundamental divide. Half the men in this room believed in Dominic's vision. The other half wanted the familiar comfort of violence and retaliation. Vincent suddenly stood, commanding silence through presence alone. "I've been with this family for 30 years, he said, his gravelly voice carrying authority earned through decades of loyalty. "I remember when Dominic's father ran things. I remember the bodies, the wars, the constant fear. I buried friends who died for pride and territory that meant nothing." He looked directly at Tony. "The boss is offering us a way out. A chance to build something our children won't be ashamed of. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it makes us targets for people like Marco who profit from the old ways. But I'm tired of funerals. I'm tired of watching young men die for nothing. So I'm with the boss. Whoever else wants to be, stand up." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, men began rising. First the younger captains, then the older ones who'd seen too much death. Not everyone, Tony and 3 others, remained seated, their expressions dark with disapproval. But enough. More than half the room stood in support of Dominic's approach. "Thank you," Dominic said quietly. "To those who are standing with me, we have work to do. Vincent will coordinate security for all our community projects. We're not abandoning protection, but we're not initiating violence either. To those who remain seated, I respect your disagreement. But if you can't support this direction, I'll arrange generous severance and help you transition elsewhere." It was a masterful move, not forcing loyalty, but offering a graceful exit, giving dissenting voices a choice while maintaining his authority. Tony stood finally, his expression unreadable. "I'll stay, but if this gets people killed, it's on you." "It's always on me," Dominic agreed. "That's what leadership means." The meeting dispersed, captains filing out with much to discuss and decide. Maya approached Dominic, seeing how heavily he leaned against the table now that the performance was over. "You need to get back to bed," she said firmly. "I need to make calls, coordinate the rebuilding, arrange security. You need to rest before you tear your stitches and undo everything." "Dr. Chen accomplished," Maya interrupted. "You made your point. You showed strength by standing up. Now show wisdom by knowing when to step back." Dominic looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Has anyone ever told you that you're remarkably bossy for someone who's only been in my life for 3 months? Has anyone ever told you that you're remarkably stubborn for someone who nearly died 2 days ago?" Despite everything, they both smiled, and in that moment, Maya realized something had fundamentally shifted between them. They'd moved beyond survivor and rescuer, beyond employer and employee, into something more complicated and precious. Partnership forged in crisis, trust built through shared values, connection that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. "Come on," she said, offering her arm for support. "Back to your room. You can make your calls from bed like a normal recovering patient." Dominic allowed her to help him, his weight more substantial against her than he'd probably intended to reveal. The strong facade was cracking now that the audience was gone. They moved slowly through the empty corridors, the hospital quiet in the late evening. Maya guided him back to his private room, helped him into bed with careful attention to his surgical site. "Maya," Dominic said as she adjusted his pillows. "Thank you for being here, for understanding what I'm trying to do, for not judging me for the life I was born into." "You don't need to thank me," Maya said, echoing his words from 3 months ago. "You showed up when I was alone and digging my mother's grave. This is just me returning the favor." "It's more than that," Dominic insisted. "You believe in what I'm building. You see the possibility of transformation, not just the violence I'm trying to escape. That means everything." Maya sat in the chair beside his bed, the same position she'd occupied so many times over the past 2 days. "My mother used to say that people aren't defined by where they come from, but by where they choose to go," she said softly. "You were born into violence and crime, but you're choosing to build hospitals and community centers. You're choosing to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. That takes more courage than any retaliation ever could." Dominic's hand found hers, there, fingers intertwining with a naturalness that surprised them both. "I'm going to rebuild that community center," he said, his voice heavy with determination and exhaustion. "And when Marco burns it again, and he will, I'll rebuild it again. I'll keep rebuilding until he understands that you can't destroy hope with violence. It just grows back stronger. Then I'll be there to help, Maya promised. Just like you were there to help me dig my mother's grave. We show up for each other. That's what this means. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, as the city lights of Chicago glowed through the window. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by grief and grave dirt, and the radical belief that transformation was possible even in the darkest circumstances. Outside Dominic's room, the hospital continued its endless work, saving lives, mending bodies, providing care to people society had forgotten. And in that private space, two hearts found rhythm together, beating out a promise that tomorrow, despite the violence and the threats and the impossible odds, they would keep showing up, because that's what love looked like. Not in grand gestures or expensive funerals, but in choosing to dig graves together, in choosing to rebuild what enemies destroyed, in choosing, every single day, to be better than the darkness that tried to claim them. 3 months ago, Maya had been alone in a cemetery, digging with bleeding hands. Now she sat beside a man who'd helped her then and needed her now, both of them understanding that the work of transformation of lives, of empires, of grief into hope was never finished. It just kept requiring you to show up, shovel in hand, ready to dig deeper toward something better. 3 weeks later, Maya stood beside Dominic at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Southside Community Center. His recovery had been faster than Dr. Chen expected, driven by sheer determination, to prove that Marco's violence hadn't won. The lot where the old center had burned was cleared now, and in its place would rise a building twice as large, with expanded programs and services. The neighborhood had turned out in force families, kids, community leaders, all gathering to witness this act of defiance disguised as construction. Thank you all for coming. Dominic addressed the crowd, his voice strong despite the lingering pain in his abdomen. 3 weeks ago, someone tried to destroy this center because they feared what it represented. Hope, opportunity, the possibility of change. He paused, letting his words carry across the assembled faces. They thought fire would end this dream. Instead, it just showed us how much this community needs and deserves spaces like this. So we're rebuilding, bigger, better. With more programs, more resources, more opportunity for every person here to build the life they deserve. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya watched from the side, seeing Dominic in his element not as a crime boss or even a businessman, but as a leader genuinely invested in lifting up communities that everyone else had written off. After the ceremony, as workers began breaking ground, Dominic approached Maya with something in his hand. A photograph, old and slightly faded. I found this in my mother's things, he said, showing her the image. It was Isabella Ferrara in her younger years, standing beside another woman in what looked like a market setting. Both were smiling, arms linked. Maya's breath caught. The other woman was unmistakably Chinese, with the same bone structure and smile that Maya saw in her own mirror. That's impossible, she whispered. I thought so too. Then I looked at the back. Dominic flipped the photo over. In faded ink, someone had written, Isabella and Lynn, Chicago Farmers Market, 1998, Lynn. Her mother's name. They knew each other, Maya said, shock rendering her voice hollow. Our mothers knew each other. For years, apparently. My mother volunteered at the market on weekends, helping immigrant vendors navigate permits and regulations. Your mother was one of the people she helped. They became friends. Dominic pulled out another photograph, this one more recent. Isabella and Lynn standing together at what looked like a holiday market, both older now but still smiling with genuine warmth. This one is from 2 years before my mother died. They stayed in touch all those years. Friends who understood each other, two immigrant women trying to build better lives for their children. Maya felt tears streaming down her face. My mother never mentioned her. Why wouldn't she tell me? Maybe for the same reason my mother never told me, Dominic said gently. Because they knew the complications. They knew our worlds weren't supposed to intersect, but they also knew something we're only just discovering. What's that? That love doesn't care about the borders we draw between legitimate and criminal, wealthy and poor, acceptable and forgotten. It just keeps connecting people who need each other, who can help each other become who they're meant to be. He handed Maya the photographs. I think they planned this somehow. I think our mothers knew that someday their children would need each other, that you would need someone to help you dig a grave with dignity, and I would need someone to remind me why I'm trying to transform this empire. They couldn't make it happen directly, but they created the conditions for it. Maya looked at the images of their mothers, friends across social divides that should have kept them apart but didn't. Two strong women who'd understood that investing in the next generation sometimes meant planting seeds you'd never see bloom. "They're still looking out for us," she said softly. "Even now. Even gone." "Yes," Dominic agreed. "And I think the best way to honor them is to keep doing what they taught us. Showing up, building something that lasts, choosing love over violence, hope over fear, transformation over tradition." He took Maya's hand, the gesture natural now after weeks of recovery spent talking, planning, and slowly falling into something neither had expected, but both desperately needed. "I couldn't do this without you," he said. "The rebuilding, the transformation, any of it. You remind me every day why it matters. Why my mother's dream of me leaving darkness behind is worth every risk, every threat, every burned building." "We do it together," Maya said, echoing words that had become their foundation. "Just like we dug that grave together. Just like our mothers were friends together. We show up for each other." Around them, construction crews began their work, the sound of hammers and machinery drowning out conversation. But Dominic and Maya stood in comfortable silence, watching the community center rise from ashes, proof that destruction is temporary, but the work of building something better is eternal. 4 months after meeting in a cemetery at dawn, they'd found what both had been searching for without knowing: partnership forged in shared loss, strengthened by shared values, and sustained by the radical choice to keep showing up for each other despite the danger, despite the complications, despite the fact that their worlds weren't supposed to intersect. But love, like hope, like transformation itself, doesn't care about supposed to. It just keeps growing, stubborn and persistent, in the soil of shared grief and grave dirt, and the unshakable belief that tomorrow can be better than yesterday if someone's willing to do the hard work of digging toward it. Their mothers had understood that truth, had lived it, embodied it, and somehow arranged for their children to discover it together. And now, standing in the sunshine while a community center rose from Marco Castellano's attempted destruction, Maya and Dominic honored that legacy the only way that mattered. By showing up, together, ready to keep digging, keep building, keep transforming darkness into light, one shovel full of hope at a time. 6 months after that groundbreaking ceremony, Maya stood in the completed Southside Community Center, watching children stream through doors that Marco Castellano had tried to ensure would never open. The building gleamed with fresh paint and possibility basketball courts, computer labs, music rooms, and a commercial kitchen where teenagers learned culinary skills that could become careers. Dominic appeared beside her, no longer moving with the careful protection of healing wounds. The scar remained, hidden beneath his shirt, but the man who carried it had transformed in ways that went deeper than physical recovery. "Your mother would love this," Maya said, gesturing to the activity surrounding them. A cooking class in session, kids playing basketball, volunteers tutoring in the study rooms. Life, abundant and joyful, in a space that had twice been targeted for destruction. "Our mothers," Dominic corrected gently, pulling out the photograph he now carried everywhere. Isabella and Lynn at the farmer's market, friends across impossible divides. This is their legacy as much as ours. Marco Castellano had tried one more time to destroy what they were building, an arson attempt that Dominic's improved security had thwarted before the fire could spread. But something unexpected had happened after that failed attack. The community itself had responded, forming neighborhood watch groups, installing cameras, creating a protective network that made further violence nearly impossible. The South Side had claimed this center as their own, and they defended it with a fierce determination that no amount of Dominic's money or influence could have purchased. It had to be earned through authentic investment, through showing up consistently, through proving that this wasn't charity but partnership. "Mr. Ferrara?" A teenage girl approached, her culinary school apron dusted with flour. "Chef Rodriguez says our soufflés are ready. Do you want to be one of the judges?" Dominic's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Absolutely. Lead the way." Maya watched him follow the girl toward the kitchen, this powerful man who'd once controlled criminal enterprises now genuinely excited about judging teenagers' soufflé. The transformation was real. Not complete, his world still had shadows, complications that wouldn't disappear overnight, but the direction was unmistakable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Doctor. Chen. Emergency incoming. Can you come in early? Maya had been splitting her time between the hospital and helping coordinate community health services at the center. The flexibility Dominic had promised was real. She worked hard, but had control over her schedule in ways her previous job had never allowed. She found Dominic in the kitchen, where 6 nervous teenagers awaited judgment on their desserts. He tasted each one with theatrical seriousness, offering genuine feedback that made the kids laugh and beam with pride. "I have to head to the hospital," Maya told him after the judging concluded. "Emergency case coming in." "I'll drive you," Dominic offered immediately. "You have the ribbon cutting for the job training center in an hour. Vincent can handle it. You're more important." The casual way he said it, "you're more important," still had the power to stop Maya's breath. 6 months of working together, of late-night conversations and shared purpose, had built something neither could deny anymore. But they'd been careful, professional, aware that their relationship existed in complicated spaces where personal and professional intersected dangerously. In the car, Dominic's driver navigating through afternoon traffic, Maya studied his profile. The strong jaw, the eyes that had seen too much but still held capacity for hope, the hands that had helped her dig a grave and now signed checks for community programs. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, catching her gaze. "That I'm grateful," Maya said honestly. 6 months ago, I was alone and broken, digging my mother's grave at dawn. Now I'm working at a job I love, helping build programs that serve people my mother would have recognized: immigrants, the forgotten, people working 3 jobs and still barely surviving. You gave me that. We gave each other that, Dominic corrected. You showed me what my mother's vision could actually look like in practice. You remind me every day why transformation matters. That's not one-sided, Maya. That's partnership. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning beyond professional collaboration. They arrived at Ferrara Medical Center as an ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance. Maya immediately shifted into nurse mode, meeting Dr. Chen at the doors. "What do we have?" she asked. 10-year-old boy hit by a car while riding his bike. Parents are undocumented, terrified to bring him to a regular hospital. Possible internal injuries. Maya's heart clenched. This was exactly why Dominic had built this place, so that fear of deportation wouldn't prevent parents from getting their children life-saving care. The next 3 hours disappeared into the focused intensity of emergency medicine. The boy, Miguel, had a ruptured spleen that required immediate surgery. Dr. Chen worked with her usual brilliant efficiency while Maya anticipated every need, monitored every vital sign, provided the steady competence that made difficult surgeries possible. When Miguel was finally stable in recovery, his parents sobbing with relief in the waiting room, Maya found Dominic in his office on the top floor. He'd changed from his community center casual clothes into a business suit, looking every inch the powerful executive, rather than the man who judged soufflé hours earlier. "How's the boy?" he asked immediately. "He'll be fine." Dr. Chen saved his spleen. "He'll make a full recovery." "And the parents?" "Terrified they'll be reported. Terrified about bills they can't pay. Terrified their son almost died because they were too afraid to seek help sooner." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Get me their information. Medical bills will be covered through the hospital's charity program, and tell them we don't report to immigration authorities, ever. That's not what we do here." Maya moved closer, drawn by the passion in his voice. "You saved that boy's life today. Not just by funding this hospital, but by creating a space where his parents felt safe enough to bring him. That matters, Dominic. That's transformation that's real and touchable and saving actual lives." He stood, moving around his desk to stand before her. The city glittered behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, his empire spread out in lights and shadows. "I couldn't do any of this without you," he said quietly. "The community center, the hospital programs, the transformation. I'm trying to achieve you, make it real. You make it matter. You make me better than I was." Maya's heart hammered as he reached for her hand, the same gesture that had become familiar over 6 months but now felt charged with new electricity. "Maya, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said months ago, but was afraid to because of complications and professional boundaries, and the fact that our worlds are still so tangled in ways that could hurt you. Dominic, please, let me finish." His thumb traced circles on her palm, nervous energy in a man who never showed uncertainty. "The day I met you in that cemetery, I was visiting my mother's grave on the anniversary of her death. I was drowning in guilt and regret, convinced I'd failed her by not being present when she needed me most. And then I saw you, digging with bleeding hands, honoring your mother in the most fundamental way possible. You showed me what love actually looks like, not in expensive monuments or elaborate funerals, but in showing up and doing the hard work, even when it breaks you. He moved closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. I've fallen in love with you, Maya Chen, with your strength and compassion, and the way you see possibility in broken things, with the way you challenge me to be better, to push harder toward the transformation my mother dreamed of, with the way you show up every single day, ready to dig toward something better. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but they weren't grief this time. They were joy and relief, and the overwhelming recognition of being truly seen and loved for exactly who she was. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since that first day when you jumped into a grave beside me without hesitation. You showed me that kindness still exists, that powerful people can choose to build instead of destroy, that transformation is possible even in the darkest circumstances. Their kiss was soft and certain, months of careful distance finally collapsing into honest connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. Our mothers planned this, Maya said, half laughing. They were friends for years, and somehow they arranged for their children to meet at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way. I believe that, Dominic agreed. I believe they're watching us now, proud that we're finishing what they started, building bridges across divides, choosing love over fear, transforming darkness into light. He pulled her close, and they stood together at the window overlooking Chicago. Two people who'd met in a cemetery at dawn now standing in the light of possibility they'd built together. 1 year after their first meeting, Maya and Dominic stood before two graves in Oakwood Cemetery's Section D. The area had been transformed, no longer forgotten and neglected, but maintained and honored, with new headstones marking the resting places that had previously been unmarked. Lin Chen's grave now had a beautiful marker, paid for by contributions from the Southside community she'd served for decades. Isabella Ferrara's monument stood 50 feet away, as perfectly maintained as ever. And between them, the earth they'd once dug together had become a path worn smooth by their frequent visits. Happy anniversary, Maya said softly, laying white lilies on her mother's grave. Happy anniversary, Dominic echoed, placing matching flowers on his mother's. They stood in comfortable silence, hands clasped, as Chicago woke to another spring morning. Around them, the cemetery was peaceful, no longer a place of lonely grief, but a sanctuary where they came together to remember and honor the women who'd made their love possible. I have something for you, Dominic said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Maya's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring with two intertwined bands, one silver, one gold. My mother's wedding ring, and your mother's wedding ring, he explained. I had them forged together, two women from different worlds, connected by friendship and shared dreams for their children. Just like us. He knelt beside Lin Chen's grave, the same earth he'd helped dig a year ago. Maya Chen, will you marry me? Will you continue building this life with me, transforming darkness into light, showing up for each other the way our mothers taught us? Will you dig graves and build community centers and save lives and create something our mothers would be proud of? Maya pulled him up, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, yes to all of it. To digging graves together and building futures together and honoring our mothers by living the lives they sacrificed everything to give us. Their kiss tasted like spring and hope, and the particular sweetness of love that's been earned through shared grief and grave dirt, and the radical choice to keep showing up. They're here, Maya whispered, feeling the truth of it in her bones. Our mothers are here, and they're happy. I know, Dominic agreed. I feel them too, proud that we found each other, proud that we're finishing what they started. They stayed until the sun rose fully over Chicago, two people who'd met in darkness now standing in light, ready to continue the work of transformation their mothers had begun decades ago, in a farmer's market where an Italian woman and a Chinese immigrant had recognized something in each other that transcended every boundary society. Erected between them, friendship, hope, the unshakable belief that love and sacrifice could create futures their children deserved. Lin Chen and Isabella Ferrara had planted seeds they'd never see bloom. But standing at their graves, Maya and Dominic were the living proof that those seeds had taken root. had grown strong, had become something beautiful and lasting. And every day forward, with every life saved and every community center built and every choice to transform, rather than destroy, they would honor that legacy. By showing up, together, by loving fiercely and building relentlessly and believing, against all evidence, that tomorrow could be better than yesterday, just like their mothers had taught them, just like they would teach their own children someday. The work of transformation, it turned out, was eternal. It just required people brave enough to pick up shovels and start digging toward hope. 6 months after that groundbreaking ceremony, Maya stood in the completed Southside Community Center, watching children stream through doors that Marco Castellano had tried to ensure would never open. The building gleamed with possibility: basketball courts, computer labs, music rooms, and a commercial kitchen where teenagers learned culinary skills that could become careers. Dominic appeared beside her, no longer moving with the careful protection of healing wounds. "Our mothers would love this," he said, pulling out the photograph he now carried. Everywhere. Isabella and Lynn at the farmer's market, friends across impossible divides. Marco had tried one more time to destroy what they were building, but the community itself had responded, forming protective networks that made further violence impossible. The South Side had claimed this center as their own. "Mr. Ferrara?" A teenage girl approached, her culinary apron dusted with flour. "Chef Rodriguez says our soufflés are ready. Do you want to be one of the judges?" Maya watched him follow the girl toward the kitchen. This powerful man who'd once controlled criminal enterprises now genuinely excited about judging teenagers' desserts. The transformation was real. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Chen needed her at the hospital emergency case incoming. "I'll drive you," Dominic offered immediately. In the car, Maya studied his profile. 6 months of working together had built something neither could deny anymore. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, catching her gaze. "That's 6 months ago, I was alone, digging my mother's grave at dawn. Now I'm working at a job I love, helping build programs that serve people my mother would have recognized." "You gave me that. We gave each other that," Dominic corrected. "That's partnership." The word hung between them, loaded with meaning beyond professional collaboration. At the hospital, a 10-year-old boy arrived hit by a car, parents undocumented and terrified. Maya spent 3 hours in surgery with Dr. Chen, saving Miguel's spleen, saving his life. This was exactly why Dominic had built this place, so fear wouldn't prevent parents from getting their children life-saving care. Later, Maya found Dominic in his office overlooking Chicago. "You saved that boy's life today," she told him. "Not just by funding this hospital, but by creating a space where his parents felt safe enough to bring him. That's transformation that's real and saving actual lives." He stood, moving to face her. The city glittered behind him, through floor-to-ceiling windows. "I couldn't do any of this without you," he said quietly. "You make it real. You make me better than I was." He reached for her hand. "Maya, I need to tell you something. The day I met you in that cemetery, I was drowning in guilt and regret. Then I saw you, digging with bleeding hands, honoring your mother in the most fundamental way possible. You showed me what love actually looks like." He moved closer, his hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "I've fallen in love with you, Maya Chen, with your strength and compassion and the way you see possibility in broken things, with the way you show up every single day, ready to dig toward something better." Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but they were joy this time. "I love you too. I think I have since that first day when you jumped into a grave beside me without hesitation." Their kiss was soft and certain, months of careful distance finally collapsing into honest connection. "Our mothers planned this," Maya said, half laughing. "They were friends for years, and somehow they arranged for their children to meet at exactly the right moment. I believe they're watching us now," Dominic agreed, proud that we're finishing what they started. 1 year after their first meeting, Maya and Dominic stood before 2 graves in Oakwood Cemetery, Section D. The area had been transformed, no longer forgotten, but maintained and honored. Lin Chen's grave now had a beautiful marker, paid for by the Southside community she'd served. Isabella Ferrara's monument stood 50 feet away, and between them, the earth they'd once dug together had become a path worn smooth by frequent visits. "Happy anniversary," Maya said softly, laying white lilies on her mother's grave. "Happy anniversary," Dominic echoed, placing matching flowers on his mother's. "I have something for you," Dominic said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Maya's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring with 2 intertwined bands, one silver, one gold. My mother's wedding ring and your mother's wedding ring, he explained. I had them forged together. 2 women from different worlds connected by friendship, just like us. He knelt beside Lin Chen's grave, the same earth he'd helped dig a year ago. Maya Chen, will you marry me? Will you continue building this life with me, transforming darkness into light, showing up for each other the way our mothers taught us? Maya pulled him up, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, yes to all of it. Their kiss tasted like spring and hope, and the particular sweetness of love that's been earned through shared grief and grave dirt, and the radical choice to keep showing up. They're here, Maya whispered. Our mothers are here, and they're happy. I know, Dominic agreed. Proud that we found each other. Proud that we're finishing what they started. Lin Chen and Isabella Ferrara had planted seeds they'd never see bloom. But, standing at their graves, Maya and Dominic were the living proof that those seeds had taken root, had grown strong, had become something beautiful and lasting. And every day forward, with every life saved and every community center built and every choice to transform rather than destroy, they would honor that legacy by showing up, together. By loving fiercely and building relentlessly and believing that tomorrow could be better than yesterday, just like their mothers had taught them. The work of transformation, it turned out, was eternal. It just required people brave enough to pick up shovels and start digging toward hope. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.